Humans did not invent alcohol from nothing, because nature had already been making it long before people learned to brew. When fruit gets overripe and warm, it ferments on its own and creates ethanol. That means the first road to drunkenness may have started in the forest canopy, not in a village brewery. Biologist Robert Dudley built this idea into what he called the drunken monkey hypothesis. His argument is simple. Our primate ancestors learned that the smell of ethanol helped them find ripe, energy-rich fruit. In that world, alcohol smell was not danger first. It was a food signal, pointing toward calories that were easy to eat and quick to digest. Modern primates still give us clues. A 2022 study of black-handed spider monkeys in Panama found that they actively sought fruit with up to about 2% alcohol. From fermented fruit alone, they consumed the rough equivalent of about 25 milliliters of beer per day. Other estimates suggest chimpanzees may consume the equivalent of about 2.5 alcoholic drinks per day from natural fermentation. That does not mean monkeys stagger around like drunk party guests. It means regular alcohol exposure is older than human culture and deeper than many people imagine. The body also seems to remember this long history. Scientists say a mutation in the ADH4 gene, which helps break down alcohol, appeared about 10 million years ago. That mutation made the enzyme far more efficient, around 40 times better at processing ethanol than before. The timing matters because it matches the era when our ancestors spent more time on the ground eating fallen fruit. If fermenting fruit was common there, better alcohol metabolism would be a survival advantage, not a luxury. So by the time humans existed, the chemistry of alcohol was already part of the family story. Then one huge change happened. People stopped finding fermentation only by accident and started making it on purpose. The oldest clear chemical evidence for intentional alcohol comes from Jiahu in northern China. There, pottery jars dated to roughly 7,000 to 6,600 BCE held traces of a mixed fermented drink. Researchers found signs of rice, honey, hawthorn fruit, and maybe grape. That makes Jiahu the oldest chemically confirmed alcoholic beverage found anywhere in the world so far. This drink was not simply beer, wine, or mead in the modern sense. It was a mixed brew, showing that early people were already experimenting with what could ferment together. Another very early case comes from Rakafet Cave near modern Haifa in Israel. Researchers found evidence that mortars carved into the cave floor were used to make a wheat and barley beer about 13,000 years ago. The setting suggests the beer was prepared for ritual feasts connected to the dead. That means alcohol was tied to ceremony before full agriculture had even reshaped human life. So ancient drinking may have grown alongside worship, memory, and social bonding from the very beginning. Soon after that, people in the Zagros Mountains of Iran appear to have mastered early winemaking. At Haji Firuz Tepe, a jar dated to about 5,400 to 5,000 BCE held residue that points to grape-based wine. The jar was large, around 9 liters, and set into the floor of a mud brick building with other jars. Researchers think wine was a smart way to preserve grapes, which spoil quickly if left fresh. So alcohol was not only pleasure, it was also preservation technology, turning fragile fruit into something that could last. In ancient Egypt, beer grew into a full industry. At Hierakonpolis, archaeologists found what may be Egypt's earliest confirmed brewery, around 3400 BCE. It may have produced up to roughly 300 gallons of beer per day, which is serious scale for the ancient world. Beer was not just for festivals there. Workers who built the pyramids of Giza were given daily beer rations of nearly 4 liters per worker. Modern recreations of that brew come out at around 5% alcohol by volume. So for many Egyptians, beer was part wages, part food, and part safe daily drink. Egypt also turned drunkenness into ritual theater. One festival remembered the story of the goddess Sekhmet Hathor, who was stopped from destroying humanity by beer dyed red like blood. She drank it, became intoxicated, and fell into a stupor, so the world was saved. People later celebrated by drinking red-colored beer in her honor. That shows something important about ancient drunkenness. It was not always shameful or private. Sometimes it was sacred and public. In Sumer, beer was woven into myth and ordinary life at the same time. A hymn to the goddess Ninkasi preserves a recipe for beer made from fermented bread, with grapes and honey added. The Epic of Gilgamesh says the wild man Enkidu drank 7 jugs of beer and sang with joy. That scene marks his movement from wild nature toward human society. Here there was almost a symbol of becoming civilized. Babylon's Code of Hammurabi regulated beer sales in detail, yet it gave no penalties for drunkenness itself. That suggests lawmakers cared more about fair trade than about moral panic over drinking. Ancient India had its own strong traditions too. By about 2000 BCE, people in the Indus world were making sura from rice meal, wheat, sugarcane, grapes, and other fruits. In later centuries, weak distillation devices appeared at Taxila and Charsada in what is now Pakistan. Those stills made only mild liquor, not the hard spirits people know today. Ancient China also built a long alcohol culture. By the Han Dynasty, naturally fermented grain wines could reach around 20% alcohol by volume. People often drank them warm and flavored them with herbs linked to traditional medicine. Centuries later, Marco Polo wrote that grain and rice wines were used daily and brought in major revenue for the treasury. So alcohol in China was food, medicine, tax income, ritual, and social glue all together. The Greeks turned wine into identity. Wine was so central to Greek life that people who did not drink it could be dismissed as barbarians. At a symposium, men gathered to talk, hear music, enjoy company, and often drink until the evening tipped into heavy intoxication. Even philosophers argued over how much was wise. Plato said no one under 18 should touch wine, Xenophon praised moderation, and Aristotle warned that drunkenness damaged character. Alexander the Great and the Macedonians were widely known as heavy drinkers, which gave the Greek world another famous example of alcohol and power mixing together. The Romans spread wine even further, but usually diluted it with water. Recipes could call for equal parts wine and water, or even 1 part wine to 4 parts water. That matters because much ancient alcohol was weaker in actual effect than people imagine. Most old beers likely sat around 1 to 3% alcohol, and many wines were watered down before drinking. Distillation, which creates strong spirits, came much later. Clear archaeological evidence for true spirit distillation in China appears only many centuries into the Common Era. In the Middle East, alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan developed distillation in the 9th century. In Europe, more systematic spirit production came from the 12th century onward and kept advancing after that. So when ancient humans got drunk, they usually got drunk on weaker drinks than modern vodka, whiskey, or rum. The medieval world kept everyday alcohol alive in humble forms. Many Europeans drank small beer, often around 1% alcohol, because it could be safer than dirty water. Monastic communities even allowed several pints of ale per day. Colonial America later leaned heavily on hard cider, with some New England households consuming about 35 gallons per person each year around 17. Eastern Europe had kvass, a mildly fermented bread drink serving a similar daily role. The Americas before Columbus had rich traditions too. Pulque from the maguey plant mattered deeply in Aztec religion, and Maya people brewed bausch from bark and honey. In the Andes, people made chicha de jora from maize, sometimes using saliva enzymes to help turn starch into sugar. Ancient Japanese sake brewing used a similar mouth-based technique in some early forms. So across the world, people kept finding local paths to the same basic result. They turned plants, sugars, grains, and fruits into drinks that could feed, bind, calm, celebrate, mourn, and sometimes intoxicate. The biggest lesson is that ancient drinking was never only about getting drunk. Alcohol served as ceremony, medicine, wages, trade, tribute, and a way to turn fragile food into lasting value. And behind all of it stood a much older biological story, where primates followed the smell of fermenting fruit through the forest. That is why human drinking history feels both cultural and strangely natural. Our bodies can process alcohol because evolution met fermentation long before cities, kings, or taverns existed. If you want the next step in the story, watch the video on when strong spirits finally arrived and how distillation changed human drinking forever.